So I'm currently in the process of writing, I don't know if it'll become exactly a book, but it's basically called The Daze After The Daze After College, the sequel to College Daze. And for those of you who don't know, when I was 23 years old, I self-published a book called College Daze, The Need for Innovative Education Reform in America's Colleges and Universities. And basically it was written in response to my experience at Washington University in St. Louis, which is considered by many to be an elite university. However, it was a university where I experienced frustration as a student and found that both the teaching styles of many of my professors and many of the courses did not meet my learning styles, and also I found that the curriculum requirements and the need to satisfy certain requirements for majors and minors didn't quite fit the curriculum that I had in mind for myself, as well as many other aspects of the university system that I soon and quickly found to be flawed, both for myself, and then I would kind of project that onto others as I came to realize that it is education that really drives our country, civically, politically, scientifically, medically. And so I quickly began to realize that if this is the way that if our education system is not running on top gear, it actually has a domino effect into many other areas of our daily lives. And so it's now about 7 years later, and I'm working on a new project. I'm currently living in Brooklyn, New York, and this project evolved after working in the public school system in New York for 4 years. And this was actually, after a conversation with one of my sisters about how I can best change the system. She said, you're going to have to work within it. And for 4 years I did that. The first 3 was teaching at a public school in Red Hook, Brooklyn, called PS27, which was a progressive-leaning school. The principal had many progressive values and visions, although it was a struggling school. We had low test scores, we had wild and unruly student behavior, and as a school culture and as an organization, we were unable, to really deal with this in a meaningful way. And the New York City in 2009 came in the springtime and made an announcement that they were closing down our school because of these test scores, and as well as issues with the administration and leadership. Our principal ended up being removed for tampering test scores and a whole other list of things. So as our school was coming to an end, I was one of the few that actually spoke up and recognized that we actually did have a pretty strong core of staff, and our principal had put together many progressive structures to support student learning and teacher professional development. And what I found was just the teacher morale was so low, and the staff unity was so divided that it was really kind of impossible to create any kind of movement within the school. And in a sense, I kind of felt like we were becoming victims, or that many of the teachers felt that the school ought to be closed, and kind of a lot of them referenced the principal and said, she's not someone that we could be a partner with, and kind of made me realize that in many ways the staff of many, in some way was advocating power to a single individual, and kind of expecting them to be the sole leader of the school, which in many respects the principal should be. However, there are many schools where what I've discovered is I found there were 17 schools this past year where the teachers organized, and they spoke up and put out a vision of how they wanted their schools to be run and how they wanted an opportunity from New York City to keep their schools open, and through legal settlements they were. And so my story continues from there as I went on to walk over a footbridge which physically divides Red Hook, a low-income community in which we serve students primarily from public housing, into a community called Cobble Hill, a more affluent neighborhood of brownstones and cafes like Le Petit Cafe and organic wine shops, basically replacing malt liquor from the public houses of Red Hook. Now I taught at the school for 6 months, and I was teaching 2nd grade and discovered it to be a radically different environment where kids were reading, where parents were involved, where teachers were knowledgeable and had experience, and the level of professional conversation was in many ways higher than what I experienced at Red Hook, although I did recognize many strengths in my Red Hook school as well as many challenges in the Cobble Hill school, as all schools and all communities are unique, and they all have their ups and downs and personal struggles. Now I ended up leaving that school in February, taking a personal leave, and then it was at that time I decided that I needed to volunteer and figure out a new direction in my life, which brought me back to Red Hook, originally just as a volunteer. However, I ran into an old colleague of mine who quickly gave me an opportunity to really get involved with the community, with the kids on a deeper level, and an opportunity for myself to kind of put together a vision of education that I've always had, a more collaborative vision, reaching out to family, friends, locals in the community, other professional networks to create strong programs for kids and families within that community. And that's where I am today. And I'm working on getting some writing out there to kind of help me to put my ideas in order and to get the support that I need to create change that I know is possible. I know that many may not fully understand what needs to be done. However, it starts with conversation and getting the word out and dialogue, and I thank you for taking the time to watch me.